Hello everyone and welcome back to my Magic the Gathering Commander Deck List Reviews. So today we will be looking at one of my favorite commanders, one of my most powerful commander decks, in Emry, Lurker of the Loch. So this is a mono blue artifact, sort of good stuff, sort of combo deck that really cares about milling artifacts and using our graveyard for maximum advantage. So right here we've got Emry, one of my favorite artifact spells in general, or artifact synergy spells. Really cool and awesome for the command zone. So Emry, Lurker of the Loch is a 3 mana, 2 colorless, 1 blue mana merfolk wizard. She's a 1/2 and she has affinity for artifacts. So basically she costs 1 less generic mana for each artifact that you control. So when you first play her, if you have at least 2 artifacts out, let's say like a Soaring Arcane Signet, she only actually costs 1 blue mana to cast. You don't actually have to use anything else. You can just slap her down, and that's one of the biggest parts of this deck, is being able to get her out pretty early. And whenever she enters the battlefield, you mill the top 4 cards of your library. But the biggest part here, those are awesome things, but you can tap her and choose target artifact card in your graveyard, and you may cast that card this turn. So this is kind of the big thing. She's sort of our whole engine all in one, and because she has a cool tap ability, there's a lot of ways to break her. So like I said, there's sort of 2 ways that you want to take this deck. There is just the generic artifact game plan where we just ramp out giant artifact good stuff spells, and there also over here is sort of our combo list. So firstly, the big part about this commander is the fact that we're not only playing with our graveyard, but she has that affinity. So the commander tax does get reduced based on the number of artifacts. So her affinity does work with commander tax. So let's say, you play her, she gets swords, you send her back to the command zone, and you control at least 4 artifacts, she will still only cost 1 blue mana to cast. And that's really the biggest strength of this deck, is it's extremely hard to remove her, and it is also extremely hard to remove our artifacts, since she is able to bring them back from the graveyard. So this is a very resilient deck in that way, which is really nice. And I'll sort of kind of go through all the different parts of this and what pieces we really care about, and of course the combo. So card advantage, we have quite a lot here. We are in mono blue, and we have a lot of good artifact draw spells, so we've got quite a lot to work with. So first up, Aether Spellbomb. I like this card for 2 reasons. It's also in another category. It's in our interaction category because it does a few different things. But it's a 1 mana artifact that allows us to sacrifice it for 1 mana and to draw a card. So this is kind of our catch-all, getting rid of either threats on the board or being able to draw a card. And the big part of it is it sacrifices itself, so it goes to the graveyard, and it's a very easy thing to not only get out, turn 1 or 2 with Emry, or with just early on in the game to get out Emry earlier with her affinity ability, but it's also very easily recurable. Costs 1 mana, we can just pay that and keep using it over and over again. And the card draw can be extremely nice in certain situations. We've got Brainstorm, which I've become sort of less on as I've kind of seen what a lot of people are talking about. The fact that if you just play this and that's it, you don't have any shuffle effects, it's a way worse card because you still have to draw those next 2 cards that you put back to the top of the library. So it's not as good in that way unless you're really fishing for just the 1 land that you need to play all of your cards. But we do have 9 tutors in the deck, so we're usually able to kind of get through stuff that we need to. And this also has the additional utility that, let's say we haven't cast Emry yet, and we want some artifacts in our graveyard to cast, we can cast Brainstorm first, put artifacts on top of our library, and then when she enters, she'll mill 4. So it's got that sort of additional utility there as well. One of my favorite new cards from MKM, well, relatively new, is Forensic Gadgeteer. So whenever you cast an artifact spell, the sort of card advantage part of this is you make you investigate, so you make a clue token. So that allows us to draw. And the other kind of part of this is the activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. And they can't reduce that to less than 1. Can't have a 0 cost ability. So that's really good because it immediately reduces those clues it makes to only costing 1 mana to draw, which is an awesome rate. And if you really wanted to, it's not in this deck. It goes very infinite with the Salt Monolith, like any reducer, so you could throw that in here, sort of another combo, but just kind of generically good. And I actually have found myself almost in some occasions even winning on top of someone's win because I'm able to flash stuff in, cast stuff, draw cards. It's an awesome engine to have when you're able to sack stuff with Emry and cast it again with Emry and just kind of go over and over. Those artifacts, we're casting so many that getting those clues is really nice. Forging the Tyrant Anchor is also a really cool card. I like this one a lot. Cool little Brothers War uncommon. So it's 3 mana sorcery. You look at the top 5 cards of your library, and then you may reveal any number of artifacts from among those cards. put them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. So this is really awesome very early on, especially because our curve for mana rocks are very, very low. We have a lot of 0, 1, and 2s. So you can kind of, Fortune Tyrant Anchor, and sometimes I've actually had it once or twice draw 5 because we have so many artifacts in this deck for 3 mana, which is really, really good, and kind of just gives us what we need. A pretty efficient draw spell in here. Frantic Search, just one of the staples. I throw it into pretty much everything. Not only does it, give us the buyback sort of on our mana when we cast it, it allows us to, draw those cards, untap our mana, and sometimes our lands can, tap for extra, depending on what we're doing. But really, also that discard is really nice because we can get more artifacts into our graveyard through that. Mishra's Bauble, so we've got a lot of 0 drops. This is sort of, I wouldn't call it a Cheerios build because we're not running, a quarter shield and that sort of thing. But we do have Baubles to sacrifice to replay very easily. Both Urza's and Mishra's in here. Draws us a card, and it's, an awesome thing to get down. There are a lot of times in this deck you're able to get down Emry turn 1, if not turn 2, because we can get stuff out so fast. Also, it works really well for Metalcraft because we do run a Mog's Opal. Mystic Remora, also just kind of generically good. Same thing with 6 Study down here, sort of that tax effect. Very good early on, draws us some extra cards. Ponder and Preordain, more draw spells that are really good. Sightmaster Thopters is kind of an interesting one. It says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you create a 1/1 Thopter. Cool. It's good to have blockers. We're in mono blue. Good to have that sort of, chumping availability. But he can also pay 2 blue, sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. So when you're casting stuff, you not only get fodder to use for his ability, but, his ability also allows you to put stuff to the graveyard as well as, giving you more card advantage. Sensei's Divining Top, another just generically good artifact card. Really, really cool for our abilities. Nothing too crazy combo potential wise in this deck. There is sort of one you can add in here, or that is in here down with a reality chip. If you're able to reconfigure this onto a creature, Emry usually, and you have any sort of cost reducer of artifacts, you can kind of just cast this from the top over and over again. And that's sort of a combo, but not really what we're looking for with the deck. We got kind of cooler ones in plan. The One Ring, so of course just generically good here, but I really do like it in this deck because not only are we an artifact deck, there are a lot of untappers in this deck which are really, really nice. And the card draw, we really need to hit what we need to hit, especially if you're going for more of the combo. You really want to make sure that you're getting what you need to get those pieces very specifically. Thoughtcast, we have a lot of artifacts. Affinity is really good. Usually you really want to play this when it's, a 1 mana draw 2, good spell. Thought Monitor, literally the same thing, just on, a creature. Also a flying 2/2, which is a really good blocker in most scenarios. And even if you're paying, 2 to 3 for this, that's not as bad because you do get the body. There's our Urza's Bauble and Windfall, of course. This is really good, having that wheel effect, disrupt hands for 1, getting a new set of 7, and those discards, like I said, with our Frantic Search, we are putting more stuff into our bin that we can reanimate. So now we got to sort of the meat and potatoes of this, is the Emry combo. So this is kind of a thing usually where we're trying to untap Emry in some way to be able to continuously cast stuff from our graveyard. So there's 2 big untappers in this deck that this works with. So we've got Mirren Spy that says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may untap target creature, which is the better of the 2 because it's only 3 mana. We also have Chakram Retriever for 5 mana that says whenever you cast a spell during your turn, untap target creature. So basically what we want to do is we want to have one of these on the battlefield, and we want to have, some sort of 0 drop or reduced drop rock either on the battlefield or in our graveyard, so that we can, with Lotus Petal being the best example, we can have Emry on the battlefield and one of our 2 untappers, and then Lotus Petal, sack Lotus Petal, add a mana, tap Emry to be able to cast Lotus Petal from our graveyard, cast Lotus Petal when we do, using one of our untappers to target Emry to untap her. So just with Emry and one of our 2 untappers, it basically means that whenever we cast spells from our graveyard, we're able to basically cast all the artifacts from our graveyard forever. And when we have access to that, any 0 drop stuff or that we can sacrifice, we can keep doing over and over and over again. So really the infinite mana combo with Lotus Petal is the ideal, though you really could, if you wanted to, use one of our other 0 drop rocks, or like I said, if you can sort of reduce it or have some sort of mana rock that you can then sacrifice to still gain, a net positive or, at least net neutral mana to continue that. And then let's say you do end up having, a Bauble that doesn't immediately win you the game, that you might kill you on your upkeep. We do have, the Storm Outwind with Aetherflux Reservoir. So you just keep casting it, an inordinate amount of times until you hit that point where you can just shoot everyone dead. And then with that infinite mana combo, we also have Assaultron Invader or Walking Ballista, something to pour that infinite mana into to just get the win right there. Or another mana dump is Urza. Amazing card just in the deck in general. Not only does it up our count for affinity for both Emry and all those other cards, it gives all of our ability to tap stuff for mana, and it has that mana sink of just casting our whole deck until maybe we hit our Aether Flux or whatnot for that win. So there's a lot of variations of this. I just put sort of the ideal here because we have a lot of ways. Like we run a KCI, Krellin Ironwork, so you're able to sacrifice your artifacts for that, and some like reducers. So there's a lot of different ways to go into it, and I don't really want to go through every permutation. You can sort of see that stuff for yourself with this main thing. Just make sure you got one of these out in some way to, you know, keep casting the same artifact over and over from your graveyard is kind of the main idea. And then, of course, we are a graveyard deck. We really do care about the graveyard, so we do have quite a few graveyard cards in here. So Academy Ruin, one of our few non-basic lands, just allows us to put artifacts from our graveyard on top of our library in case we can't cast them or we want to save them for later or whatnot. Or maybe we don't have Emry available to us. We can put that on top. Alter Dementia allows us, we do a lot of times make big constructs or whatever. Or even if we really need to, sack Emry to this ability to, you know, mill a few cards for ourselves. This usually isn't targeted towards opponents because we really care about milling ourselves. I'm not really a huge player on opponent mill. I way more love self mill that helps me. So I run these kind of cards for that. Esoteric Duplicator, one of my kind of favorite cards here in the deck as well. Just whenever you sacrifice it or another artifact, you may pay 2. If you do, create a token copy of that sacked permanent at the beginning of the next end step, except that token, it is a, you know, token copy of the artifact. Just a little bit of weird wording there. And this itself is a clue token, so you can pay 2, sack a draw card. But really, it's more of the, oh, hey, I have KCI out. I'm able to sacrifice some, you know, my Gilderses or whatever, pay for them to come back. And you can sort of, you know, early on, you just develop a giant list of a bunch of really good tokens. So Feldon's Cane is our one reshuffler ability, just in case we somehow mill out, or, you know, we have one of our 2 draw out spells kind of in the graveyard or whatever, we can't get to them for whatever reason, or let's say someone tries to exile our graveyard, we have this to kind of reshuffle and try it again. And then we got 2 here, or I guess really 3, with Junk Diver, Mirror Retriever, and Scrap Trawler. So just when they die or other stuff dies, we're able to return artifacts from our graveyard to our hand. So the Junk Diver also does have some combo stuff in here. It's not really the main point, but they're, you know, you can find it very easily, especially with KCI, some sort of combos where you can send this to the graveyard, bring stuff back and whatnot. And I think that, you know, they go with each other as well. So pretty easy there. The Mesmeric Orb, this is one of my few that I do run to mill everyone out. But again, this is really good for us because we can tap all of our permanents, even if, you know, we're not using them for mana, just to mill ourselves more to kind of have more of that card advantage with that. And then we also aren't running a whole lot of interaction. I've said this before in previous videos, but I don't run into a super interaction heavy meta, and that is slowly changing over time as people's decks are just getting better, and, you know, Magic in general I think is sort of speeding up. We're seeing more of it. So Aether Spellbomb has that other activated ability to bounce a target creature to its owner's hand, which is really, really nice, and I've used it a lot. Very good for that. Offer You Can't Refuse, Counterspell, sort of just our generic counterspell package, Miscast, Pact of Negation. You know, that's our one, you know, you could really bump this up on the, you know, the interaction package, especially with the counterspells if you really wanted to. If you're really, you know, have a higher level meta, I don't always go for the Emry combo unless I'm playing with a, you know, a high power play group. I usually run this as more of a just artifacts matter value package. But for that, I would definitely recommend running maybe 1 or 2 more interaction pieces. Liberator is one of those that's really, really nice for those high level matchups. Just being able to flash all of your artifacts in it is really, really good and really, really helpful. Especially when you have Emry out and you can tap stuff and, you know, keep doing it over and over again. Spell Sky, really, really good just to, you know, blank out that Swords to Plowshares or, you know, what have you. Kind of really, it's protection for Emry. And then, of course, the One Rings of Fog effect. So, you know, that's in there for that purpose as well. And then we are, if you haven't seen already, running only 24 lands, which seems really low and is definitely pretty low. But because we really care about Emry more than anything, and her mana cost gets reduced to 1 almost all of the time, and so many of our rocks and mana, we have 20 ramp spells, so we almost have more ramp than we do straight up lands. And they're, you know, pretty low cost. You know, we got LED in here, Moxable, all that kind of stuff. They're pretty low cost and low to the ground, that once we have Emry out and we're able to get stuff into our graveyard, we don't need that much to really get going. I haven't seen too many mana problems with this deck, which is actually, when I put this together, I'm very surprised to see how low it had gotten, because I don't really feel it all that much. And that might be just in my playstyle and the times I play, because I don't play this all the time, but I feel like I've played it enough to where I would normally see that. But yeah, it seems to work pretty well for what it is. So Academy Ruins, we talked about that earlier. So Archery of Innovation is a card that, you know, sometimes works to the advantage. I haven't gotten a super whole lot of value out of this card, but, you know, anytime that I can run not an island in something that's slightly better is really cool. So basically, this is an island or something that enters untapped, you know, for all purposes, usually an island, but it does have the activated ability where you can pay a blue to tap it, to give the next spell you cast this turn improvise. So let's say you have something really big you want to cast, like maybe you have a KCI and you don't have a whole lot of mana out, or you have stuff that doesn't tap for mana, you know, like you have your Mesmeric Orb or whatever. You can sort of make sure you get those slightly higher costed stuff onto the battlefield. Seed of the Synod, again, just something, you know, the reason why they were banned, we're doing it for the same reason. We want that affinity and to kind of up that count. Really good, you know, turn one, if you can play Seed of the Synod plus, you know, a Mishra's Bauble, that's turn one Emry very, very easily. Urza Saga, you know, just a generically great card. Of course, run this in pretty much every deck, but we really do care about, you know, creating those constructs with its second trigger. And, you know, that 1 or 0 mana cost tutor is a lot of our deck. We have so much to go look for, which is, you know, this is a very, very powerful card. One of the places I put my few Urza Sagas is in here, because I think it does so much on every single trigger, which is really, really cool. Like I was saying, we got a lot of ramp here, you know, Arcane Signet, Astronaut's Altar, really cool for Emry if we need to, if we need, you know, a little bit more extra mill. We do have some mana reducers that, you know, help with that plan of, you know, the jellyfish attaching and, you know, getting a bunch of extra value there. We've got Cloud Key, Ethereum Sculptor, Fel Warstone, you know, generic stuff. Guild Lotus, I like these specifically because we are running our clock, so that we can untap stuff and tap stuff for extra mana. Kind of gives us that extra value there. Grand Architect is really, really cool because you can, you know, tap Emry for mana if you really need to, or, you know, make our artifacts blue to tap them for mana. Sort of like a baby Urza. High Tide, you know, just a way to get a little bit of extra value out of our islands. KCI, of course, is awesome, does a lot of combo stuff, and being able to sacrifice artifacts to its ability to add mana, really, really nice. It doesn't go on the stack because it's a mana ability, so you can get around a lot of weird removal too. LED, so this is one of those cards that usually, you know, for a long time it was seen as really bad because it's a Black Lotus that makes you get rid of your hand. But the fact that we are discarding our hand can usually be an upside in this deck because we can cast stuff from our graveyard. So it's just kind of a Black Lotus most of the time in our decks, or maybe sometimes a little better. A Liquid Metal Torque, just another good generic mana rock, but we can use it for that extra ability to make something else a permanent, to up our affinity count if we need it. Lotus Petal, of course. Mox Opal, also really good. I got this way before it got unbanned in Modern, which is I'm very thankful for. Shot up in price there. Sapphire Medallion just reduces, you know, our you know, few colorless or blue spells, you know, just a little bit, you know, can be nice for that. Scepter of Eternal Glory. I love this in every monocolor deck, and I feel like it kind of got some spotlight when it first came out, but has kind of been on the down low since then. I think from the Necron pre-con it came out. It was really, really, really good. It's basically a colored Thran Dynamo. You just have to have 3 lands that are of the same name to tap it for 3 mana, but very, very good. Semblance Anvil, our best cost reducer. We're always going to have artifacts to pitch to this, and it's really awesome to just lower our curve even more. Soul Ring, of course. Thought Vessel, you know, just another piece. And sometimes we do actually get up to that max hand size, which can be really nice. Thran Dynamo, and then Urza, you know, just a bunch of mana. And then for tutors, we do got kind of a weird thing here. So Drift of Phantasms we're specifically using for the transmute ability. And if you haven't seen this card, it looks kind of weird. But transmute is a pretty broken mechanic in my opinion. It's kind of like an uncounterable tutor because it's on an ability. So transmute basically says pay whatever cost and then go search your library for a card with the same mana cost as the card. So not the cost that you paid, but the mana cost of the card. So this is a 3 mana card. And really this says usually, hey, tutor for your Mirran Spy. That's kind of the big one here. But you can grab a few other things if you really needed it, but that's kind of the main thing we're looking for. We've got Encroaching Mycosynth, and so I threw this in the tutor category because it makes our tutoring a lot better, and it kind of helps us for those win conditions that we need it. So it makes basically all non-land permanents in every zone for you and spells you control, artifacts, which is really, really good for the deck, because that means all of your artifact tutors now can basically grab any non-land permanent in your deck, and it means if we have non-land permanents in our graveyard that we want, we can get those with Emry as well. So the big ones that this matters with is our 2 draw out win cons, which I don't usually do all of the time. It's kind of a boring win, so I try not to throw it in there, but sometimes you just get to the point where you've played most of your deck and that's kind of what you need to get to. So Jace Wielder of Mysteries and Laboratory Maniac both have the text: if you would draw while your library has no cards in it, you win the game rather than lose it. And so making these artifacts kind of gives us that way to get them back, and not really have to worry about, oh hey, I lost my only win con here, now I'm just going to draw myself out. Moon Silver Key, really, really good, because really the cool thing here is because Krark-Clan Ironworks' ability is a mana ability, it is able to grab you KCI, which is really, really awesome. Though if you really need to, we've got a whole bunch, a whole slew of different mana rocks. That's most of what we're running in here. So this does grab a good portion of our deck. Mystical Tutor, a lot of times this is just, hey, I need a counter spell right now, since we are only running so many instants or sorceries, but can still kind of be that piece that we need. It's 1 mana. If you really need to, I have used this a lot as a tutor for a tutor, getting specifically, oh, we need a reshape or a Word of Invention or whatever. But speaking of reshape, sacrifice an artifact, go tutor something. Not a super great tutor, but we are kind of hurting on them. We don't have a whole lot to pick from. This deck, one of the includes I would add in here, I think I had it in here for a minute, but I just need to get more copies of, is Fabricate. Just 3 mana search for an artifact, put it into your hand. Really, really good. So all the equations sort of that same thing with Mystical Tutor, just a little slightly worse, though it is to hand, which is really, really nice. Trinket Mage goes and grabs us, usually our combo piece in Lotus Petal. Just another way to, grab what we really, really need. And of course, Urza Saga grabs us a 1 or 0 mana rocked. And then Word of Invention is really awesome for this deck because it's an instant speed tutor that, not everyone's going to see coming, and it has the improvisability, so you can tap artifacts to help pay for it. So you can kind of get something pretty expensive, even though it is 3 blue. You can usually make up for that because of the improvise cost, which is really, really nice. And this is the card I couldn't remember the specific name of earlier, Clock of Omens. So this is one of our huge untappers, where you can tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to untap another target artifact. So, for our One Rings and whatnot, and really for our Gilded Lotuses. And that's why I like these sort of high-end tap for a bunch mana rocks, is because you can make most of your stuff tap for mana. So let's say you have a Soul Ring out. You can basically give all of your artifacts the ability to tap for a colorless, because you tap 2 artifacts, untap your Soul Ring, and tap that for 2 colorless. So you basically get there's ability, which is really, really nice. Just sort of basic value, not very specifically anything, but these are just really, really good cards for the deck. Cabot Cannoneer is one of those that is sort of that general, more fun win con here. It's got Improvise, which is really, really nice because it is a 6 mana spell. And it's just a broken card. So if you haven't seen this before, this I think even wrecked. It got so good it was wrecking Legacy because of how good it was. 8-cast, I believe, is the deck that was playing this, which is really cool to see, but definitely tells you that this is a high-powered card. So yeah, it's got that Improvise, which is really nice. Ward 4, which is basically hexproof. I think anything 3 and up is usually just hexproof. Pretty crazy. But really the most broken line of text here is whenever an artifact enters your battlefield, you put a counter, a +1/+1 counter on this, and it can't be blocked this turn. So when this comes down, it sees itself. So you're casting this for 3-4 mana, whatever it ends up being, with your cost reducers, usually 1 with this deck. It comes down, it sees itself, it immediately puts a counter on it. So this is always coming down as a 5/5 unless someone has a Torpor Orb or whatever, and it immediately becomes unblockable. So we are running Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves as well. So you can instantly hit someone for an unblockable 5/5 as soon as this comes down, which is really, really good. But we are making, so many artifacts and putting so many down. Even if you have a Psymaster Thopterist out or Forensic Gadgeteer, those are more artifacts entering the battlefield as you just, play out your deck normally. This thing becomes, a 20/20 or bigger, very, very fast, and is really, really awesome. Very, very good for the deck. I love it. Manifold Key, another one of our untappers, and it is also nice. It can make something unblockable. So if we have our big constructs from, Urza Saga or what have you, even Simulacrum Synthesizer, we're able to, get these big dumb creatures and swing with them, which is really, really nice. One of my favorite cards of all time, I absolutely love Mirage Mirror because it does so much, and it kind of allows you, especially if you're in a low power pod or maybe your lower power deck and you're playing against a bunch of, higher power decks, being able to copy an artifact, creature, or enchantment or a land is awesome. Let's say your friend's got a Gaia's Cradle that they just bought. You're able to pay 2 mana, make this into a Gaia's Cradle, and just kind of go nuts. But really, a lot of times I've actually copied One Rings or whatever. Which is really, really awesome. One Ring is actually one of the coolest interactions, because let's say your opponent has a One Ring and you pay 2 mana to make this a copy of the One Ring. You tap it for the first time, put a burden counter on it, and then draw your card. The big thing with this is an until end of turn effect, so it is no longer a One Ring at the end of turn. So the effect of at your upkeep, the One Ring doing damage to you, you completely get rid of with this, because every time that you make this into an artifact during your main phase, you can tap it, even if it has like, 20 counters and you're drawing, a good portion of your deck. You're never going to see that damage because it's only an artifact during the latter half of your turn. It's never going to see the beginning of your upkeep, even if you wanted it to, which is really, really awesome. So this is awesome. If you've got someone that's playing One Ring, I don't really care what deck you're running, this is awesome for it. I really, really like this card. It has so much mobility. Even if you, copy a Kappa Cannoneer, go crazy. This keeps all the counters. If you put +1/+1 counters or burn counters or whatever, you can kind of just get in there with it. And it also does, just like Sculpting Steel, have the additional purpose of kind of using the One Ring's sort of hidden tech, being that it is a legendary permanent. So if you copy the One Ring, your own One Ring on the battlefield with a Mirage Mirror or Sculpting Steel, it legend rules, so you have to put one of them away. So not only does that allow you to reset the number of counters on it, but if you're using Sculpting Steel specifically, because Sculpting Steel is worded as not an enter the battlefield trigger, but as it enters trigger, you are able to have it enter as a One Ring, and because the card itself was still cast, it sees the cast trigger of the One Ring and gives you the fog effect. So with this deck, you can kind of just turbo fog with Emry, since you can keep recurring that, where you can one turn, cast the One Ring, get your fog, the next turn, cast it, get your protection, and with the Sculpting Steel, legendary rule the old One Ring away that has the burning counters on it or whatever, or maybe even keep it if you want to, an extra turn with it, with the burning counters to draw a few more cards. But basically every turn, because Emry can recur it, you can just keep doing that over and over and over again, unless someone, gets rid of Emry or gets rid of your graveyard or whatever. You can just have pro everything every single turn, which is really, really cool. Maybe not something everyone's super into, but I think it's kind of just a fun interaction here. Phyrexian Metamorph is also really, really nice. Same exact thing with the One Ring, because it enters as a copy of something, slightly more cost, or if you're paying the life, same costed, same exact thing. But a lot of times, if someone has a Crater Hoof or whatever, or some giant creature that you want to copy, this can be anything. I mean, what if a lot of people also don't realize with this card, and most copying cards, is they do not target. It just says you may have this enter as a copy of any artifact or creature. It does not say the word target, so this gets around Hexproof and Shroud and Ward, all of those abilities, because it's not targeting any creature. And that also means people have to counter the spell, or else you just get whatever it is. You do not have to name whatever you have it enter as until the spell resolves. So there could be a bunch of threats on the board, and you don't have to say what you're doing until it's actually down and is that threat, which is really, really nice. Just one of those, it's in the value column because it can be anything you want and it can do a lot in the deck. And one of my favorites, probably my favorite card from OTJ, was Simulacrum Synthesizer. So this is really cool. It's got that ETB Scry 2 ability, but the big thing with this, especially because we're running a little bit of affinity, we get that value where whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you make a construct, which is super duper broken. And let's say you copy this with Sculpting Steel, you can get even more of those triggers with it. Our affinity stuff, like I said, you cast your Thought Monitor for 1 mana, make a giant dude. And that's sort of the line I usually like to go in more casual games, where I just try to get out my synthesizers and my copying spells to sort of just make a bunch of big dumb guys to swing with, which I think is really, really fun. And our last but most powerful untapper in the entire deck, of course, is Unwinding Clock. So this is really big, especially with cards that you can tap and get value for every turn, like the One Ring. It also leaves up, a lot of your mana every single turn. So if you're running the One Ring, and really the biggest combo here is with Liberator, if you could give your artifacts flash and have Unwinding Clock, it's basically just, you get a turn every single person's turn. A really, really good effect. And you can just keep casting stuff, and tap your mana, have stuff up for interaction or to activate abilities, what have you. At that point, it's basically just a Prophet of Krufix effect, which is banned because it's so good. So you know that this is a really, really cool combo. Unwinding Clock, just a great card in pretty much any artifact deck, but can do a lot with our stuff depending on what you've got on the board. But just generically having a little bit of extra mana up every single turn is great for your interaction spells. And then I sort of talked about it a while ago, but we do have our 2 draw wins here. We don't run Thassa's Oracle because we really don't need that many. I just threw these two in here because they can kind of sit on the board and get a little bit of extra value sometimes, mostly with Jace here. You could add a Thassa's Oracle if you really wanted to, but a lot of times what ends up happening, especially within our Emry combo, is that, you know, you may not have a Lotus Petal on the battlefield and you might have a Mishra's Bauble. And yes, you might be able to cast that forever and ever because it's 0 mana, but at the next opponent's upkeep, you have, you know, a billion triggers on the stack to draw yourself out. So that's why I like this more than Thassa's Oracle a lot of times, is because you can do this combo, go to the next step, and then you have Laboratory Maniac or Jace out to just draw yourself out. And of course, it can die to, you know, damage or whatever, but it could have, you know, died on your turn as well. That's something you just kind of have to worry about, is all your stuff is going to die to removal. Jace kind of being the better version of this because there's less Planeswalker removal spells comparatively to creature removal spells. But yeah, that's kind of why we value these more as sort of just a static trigger rather than an enter the battlefield's trigger for our win con. But yeah, that is this Emry deck. I really do hope you have enjoyed this. This is one of my favorites, probably up there with my Kinnan deck, my first review. I really love this deck. I'm just a huge fan of artifacts and what they can do, and I like making different colors of artifact decks. I know I have at least one in every color. I'm getting close to actually having one in every mono color because I think every single color, depending on what combination you have, just does something a little bit different and you get access to certain things, which is really cool. But yeah, I will definitely make sure to put a link to this Moxfield deck in the description below so you can check that out. I will also make sure to leave a link to the playlist of all these deck list reviews so you can go check that out as well. But besides that, I will see all of you beautiful people in the next one.